Welcome back to another episode of Vendetta Sports Media's Cricket World Cup coverage. I'm Jerry Walker, and with me, as always, is Jarrod Prosser. And the first round is over now, and boy, were there some kind of shocks to what we were expecting to see happen. So I think we should get right into it. What's your just initial thoughts, Jarrod?
Man, there was in Group A, there was one result that neither of us predicted. We were pretty much across the board, for those who remember our pod 48 hours ago, as to what would happen in this last round of the preliminary matches. We got a couple right, but gee, we got a couple very, very wrong as well.
Yes, we did. But we'll hop into that first one. One of the ones that we did get right, Sri Lanka and the Netherlands. Sri Lanka ended up winning by 16 runs, 162 for 6 against the Dutch's 146 for 9. And really, to me, it was the starting batting for Sri Lanka that really took off. What did you
Yeah, yeah.
like Kusal Mendes, for example, 79 runs from 44 balls. Not a pretty impressive inning.
And a powerful innings as well. 5 boundaries and 5 sixes. Like he carved that ball to all parts of Kardinia Park. It was a really good opening stand. You know, you mentioned Mendes, but also Bethune Nasanka. 79 and lots of big hitting for Mendes, but Nisanka was a really good support for him. The team did get bogged down a little bit in in some of those earlier overs. As much as they were steady, it was still 60 from the first 10, but geez, once they accelerated, they really, really pulled away. Like over 100 runs in that last 10 overs was like magnificent to watch. And that was when Mendes really unleashed. He almost carried his back, got dismissed in the last over, and it was a really good catch from Van Beek, the sub, to get him out as well. He was. It took a very good dismissal to stop him from batting the full 20 overs.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about a couple players throughout this tournament who have gone almost the 20 overs. I think one or two have, but it's just impressive to see a batter go from the opening to the finish. And 79 runs shows that why he was doing that and why he was able to keep going. But what else kind of stood out to you in that Sri Lankan inning?
Um, there wasn't a hell of a lot else going on in the innings. It was very much around Mendes and that power hitting at the end. But probably should spare a mention for the Dutch bowler Paul van Meekeren. 2 for 25 from his 4 overs, solid looking figures. But he picked up Nisanka and De Silva in consecutive balls. He was sitting on a hat trick. We were close to getting our second hat trick of the tournament, but look. Aside from that, it was I guess a good effort from the Dutch bowling, but they just, like, when Sri Lanka put the foot down, the Dutch just didn't have the quality of bowling to rein them back in, and Mendes just went wild at the end. It was wonderful to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of what we were expecting from Sri Lanka through more of this tournament. I know they started out very slow against Scotland, but
Yeah.
and we were thinking maybe the Sri Lanka team isn't for real, but then back-to-back wins against the UAE and Namibia. No, yeah, no, again,
UAE and
UAE and
Netherlands.
because yeah, they lost to Namibia, not Scotland.
Yeah.
Completely blanked that one, but now they're looking like a kind of a good threat. And going into that Group A, which we'll touch on a little bit, of that Group 1, they could cause an upset or two.
Look, I'm probably not as convinced. I think they're certainly back into form. And even on the bowling side, when we talk about the Dutch innings, Hasaranga, the spinner, he seems to be getting better the more matches he played. He had 3 for 28 in this innings to lead the attack. But ultimately, this one was relatively close. Like, this Dutch batting lineup isn't super strong. They've got a few good batsmen there. Like, Max O'Dowd, you were talking about carrying his bat. Max O'Dowd did carry his bat in this one, opened up the innings and went for 71 off 53 with, again, some power hitting, 6 boundaries and three maximums. The good New Zealand boy Maxi, he's lived in Holland when he grew up, but probably identifies as much as a Kiwi. But he's massive shots in this one. But yeah, unfortunately for the Dutch, no one came along with him. Bastelater, who has had a good tournament so far, he looked threatening for a while. Scott Edwards scored a quick fire 21, but yeah, look, I got to admit, yeah, for the Dutch, this one left them needing needing the UAE to get a result against Namibia, which looked unlikely and we didn't think would happen in a pink fit. But Sri Lanka, as much as they're rounding back into form, I'm still not seeing the quality there to really threaten anyone. They're rounding back into their level of form, which is certainly below their, the best of the days of Ranatunga and Aravinda De Silva, Chaminda Vaas, these sort of guys. Yeah, I'm not as convinced on Sri Lanka. I think they've done well to make it this far, but the more I've seen, the more I've been convinced that they've fallen backwards considerably. And probably not quite into the minnow status, but they're certainly not one of the big boys.
Yeah, I guess the quality of opponents they're playing isn't nearly as serious as they will be playing. So and the wins aren't even that convincing, really. But that's
the point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like you said, the Dutch batting outside of O'Dowd was kind of sort of non-existent. I mean, there's a reason Paul van Meekeren is much more of a bowler. Is he got out without even facing a ball. He got run out in his
that's unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate for him, but there were 6 batters who scored 3 or less runs, and one of them was the last guy. Just didn't seem.
There's not a lot of depth in that batting lineup. I've actually come around a bit on the Dutch bowling lineup. I got to admit I was a little bit naive on them coming into the tournament, but they've impressed me. But yeah, outside of O'Dowd, I haven't seen a lot on the batting side from the Dutch. So yes, Sri Lanka won, but it wasn't super convincing, and it doesn't instill me with a lot of confidence for what they're going to do in the Super 12s. But we should move to the other game because the Dutch, having topped the group, needed UAE to pull off the upset against Namibia, and they only damn well went and did it.
Yeah,
shocked the hell out of me, Jerry.
I don't think anyone was really expecting that. I know we both were saying we think Namibia was kind of going to run away with this because the United Arab Emirates had just looked so bad. They looked like the worst team in the tournament by far through their first 2 matches. Ended up winning by 7 runs, 148 for 3 to 148 1 for 8. And it really all started with their opener, Mohamed Wasim, who had 50 runs from those 41 balls and kind of just set the pace for him.
It was an interesting innings. And, generally when a minnow wins a T20 game, and UAE are the minnows of this tournament, it's because somebody has just had an out-of-body experience, whether a bowler's picked up 4 for 9 or a batsman's gone out and smacked 80 or 90. But this was actually a really patient innings, a controlled innings. Now, as you can tell, they only lost 3 wickets and still put up 148. You mentioned Wasim, he had 50, and he will be disappointed with the way he got out. Having reached his 50, just chipping one to gully. Rizwan, 43 not out. Basil Hamid, 25 not out at the end, off just 14 balls. Aravind, the other opener, a slow 21. But yeah, this was a really controlled innings. They did up the run rate late and gave the bowlers something to bowl towards. But I was really impressed with the maturity of the innings. It's not something I would have thought UAE would be able to do. But look, ultimately, whether UAE won this game, lost it, or drew it, after how bad their batting was against Sri Lanka, they really needed this sort of innings, just something to rebuild the confidence in the team.
Yeah, absolutely, because they were pretty annihilated. I think they finished for, 76 or 77 against Sri Lanka?
Yes. Yeah, it's in the 70s somewhere.
Something around there. It was just, this was a nice step forward for a team that hasn't really been much of a cricket well-known team at all. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the future after this, because I mean, getting a win in the World Cup is a big accomplishment for them. So it's impressive.
And I just want to say, in this innings, as much as the UAE batsmen were quite, controlled in what they were doing, there wasn't really much of a threat from the Namibian bowlers, which was surprising. The Namibians aren't a bad bowling lineup. They were economical, but they rarely troubled the UAE batsmen. I thought David Visa was pretty good. He bowled better than his 1 for 27 suggests. With Visa, I can't get over how much he looks like David Carradine in the Kill Bill movies. Like he really looks like a younger version of him. But that's a non sequitur for another day. But yeah, I was really disappointed with the Namibian bowling in this one. They looked pedestrian. Like the UAE were controlled, but they didn't have to battle to keep their wickets. They were able to just, they were able to keep the bowling tamed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, like JJ Smith, 39 runs in 4 overs with no wickets. Jan Frey.
He was bad. Unusually bad.
Yeah. I don't know. It just because we expected more from him and saw more throughout this tournament. And then same with Jan Freiling, 30 runs in 3 overs, no wickets. The only one who kind of stood out in his 1 over was Ben Shikongo to me. 1 wicket, 8 runs though. So wasn't the most productive over, but I don't know. And it was, to me, it's kind of the same with the Namibian batting. It was just very, very disappointing outside of David Vise. Like Erasmus out for 16, Jan Freiling out for 14, JJ Smith out for 3.
And all of those bad individual performances, like that adds up to, it was just an awful start. 3 wickets lost in the power play, 3 for 34 after 6 overs, 7 for 69 in the 7th when Zahur Khan cleaned up Zane Green. Like just a really good ball, really good Yorker. Visa and Ruben Trumpelman, and that's a great name, Ruben Trumpelman. Really they put on a bit of a rearguard action and almost got the team back into it. Visa had, he was really good with the bat actually, 55 from 36. Trumpelman had 25 from 24 as the support player, I suppose. They almost stole this match for the Namibians, and they turned what could have been a disastrous innings into merely a disappointing one. But given what was at stake, I mean, this is the work, for you and I, and take our word for whatever you want to take it with. But we thought the UAE were the worst team in the tournament, and Namibia, all they had to do was beat them, and they're going through to Super 12s, and they choked. I'll call it, they choked.
They really did. So at the end of Group A, after the first round, we have Sri Lanka winning the group and going on to playing Group 1. We have the Netherlands going on to Group 2 as the second place team. Namibia and UAE, one of them is packing their bags and going home much happier than the other one, I would say.
Oh, yeah. This was a lost opportunity for the Namibians, without a doubt.
Because all it was they have to beat the one team that the other two in the group kind of thrashed, but they couldn't do it. So with that, we'll move on to Group B. And the first match that happened was the West Indies and Ireland. And this group, Jerry, just remember this group. This wasn't a group where you had to, this wasn't a group where you had to rely on other results or rely on net run rate. Everyone was tied going into this match. So this was a shootout round. This one, it was win or go home for all 4 sides. Yeah, absolutely. There's no cost for error. You don't have to rely on anyone else like the Netherlands did, and they were probably really kind of shitting themselves when Namibia when they started getting going at the end there. But we'll start with the West Indies and Ireland, and this is one I don't think we picked very well. I thought
we did not. No,
I was kind of thinking the West Indies would come out and do something much more impressive against Ireland, but we'll start with the West Indies inning. They went 146 for 5, lost by 9 wickets to Ireland's 150 for 1, but it wasn't much impressive to me from the West Indies. Started out very poorly with Kyle Mayers getting out for 1 run off 5 balls, but...
Yeah, I said it in the last pod, Jerry, that I'm struggling to see the point of Kyle Mayers, and again, another failure at the top of the order. It's just been an awful tournament for him.
It really has been. There's been no consistency and not much of anything there. But
I'd pull you up on that and say there's been lots of consistency, but it's been consistently crap.
Yeah, that is actually fair. That's probably the better way to put it. Because you have a guy who's coming in as the opener, and we look at in the Netherlands match, Max O'Dowd. He went off as the opener for 71, and Wasim was one of the openers for 50. Kyle Mayers is in here opening for the West Indies, a traditional powerhouse, which isn't as of recent time, as we've mentioned before, but he's out for one after 5 balls.
And O'Dowd has been putting up scores pretty much, he's put up a couple of big scores now, whereas Mayers just has not gotten going. And he's bowled a bit as well and been, carted all over the park. So, this was like 146. This was not what the West Indies were expecting. We've got to make a shout out to Brandon King, 62 off 48. He was very, very good. Johnson Charles, who was excellent last time out, he briefly threatened, but he couldn't repeat the heroics from the previous match. There was a late little flourish from Odean Smith, but ultimately, King never really looked troubled, but nobody came along for the ride with this one.
Yeah, it was a one-man army, and I gotta give some credit to the Irish bowler of Gareth Delaney.
Oh yeah.
He was outstanding in that match. 3 wickets, allowing 16 runs in 4 overs. He just kind of shut down that West Indies side as the inning went on.
And he got some really typical, in short form cricket anyway, typical for a leg spinner wickets. He just beat batsmen in flight. All 3 of his wickets were big hoiks, skied into the air and just picked out fielders, a couple in the outfield, 1 in the infield. And just really good bowling. Just he managed to drift that ball away. He got it to dip quickly, and that was what got batsmen in. The fact that he was able to get that ball dipping quickly. They were, through their shots, ended up skying it, and it was really good leg spin bowling from Delaney. 12 dot balls as well out of 24, deliveries, which was very impressive.
Yeah.
The West Indies just could not find their timing against him. It was an outstanding bowling performance from him.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the 12 dot balls, it just shows that he was throwing stuff that's really difficult to hit and kind of making a mess of things for the West Indies batting.
And it's worth mentioning, Jerry, that, and this is more for the the more uninitiated American viewers that we're attracting with this. Leg spin bowling is the most difficult form of bowling. In baseball, you get people who throw knuckleballs, for instance, and it's really rare to be able to control a knuckleball. Leg spin bowling is almost like that, where you can do so much with it, but it's really difficult to master the art. And I'm not saying Delaney is a master of the art by any means, but when someone gets leg spin bowling right, it's so damn hard to play. And he got it very, very right in this game down in Belrive.
Yes, he did. And then why the West Indies bats were really not hot to start. Ireland, on the other hand, came out firing right away. Paul Sterling and
sorry, go on.
I was going to say Paul Sterling and Andy Balbirnie just really put on a show to begin that match.
Well, we've spoken pretty much, I think, after both Irish matches, I believe, about that potent middle order. Dockrell and Delaney and those sort of guys. But they got to put their feet up. They didn't even make it onto the park with their pads on. This was the top 3 got the job done. You mentioned Paul Sterling. He's been around a while now. He was on the Irish side that broke through into what was then the Super 10s back in 2009. I think he was a teenager back then. So he's in his early to mid-30s now. I think he's 33, maybe 32. But he only had 8 runs through the first 2 games. And in this game, it's like a swashbuckling 66. He's 6 off Alzari Joseph, and it was a massive 6, a monster of a hit. That really set the scene. The opening stand with Balbirnie, they went for 73 in their opening stand. They were none for 60 in the power play, just carving the West Indian bowling up. When Balbirnie went out, Sterling, he batted with a bit more consideration, but ultimately by then the damage was done, and it would only be a massive, massive Irish collapse that would see the Windies get back to the game. Fortunately for Ireland and for Sterling, they got a good version of Lorcan Tucker coming in at first drop, and the 2 of them managed to steer Ireland home with, I think it was 15 balls to spare. Like, it was a comfortable win in the end.
Yeah, it was very, very easy win for Ireland, and not something we really expected to see. And I mean, we talked about Balbirnie and Sterling early, but that fourth over, Balbirnie started with a 4, a 6, and a 4 on 3 consecutive balls, kind of just pushing that bowling away. And I mean, as far as Sterling goes, kind of a not necessarily a funny thing, but something I noticed was he kind of fouled the ball off right into where it hurts the most, and then immediately comes back and hits a 6. So
Yeah,
nothing was stopping the Irish attack that day.
yeah. Look, it's a testament to the construction of cricket boxes.
Yep.
Protecting the man parts, shall we say?
Yeah.
um, but yeah, look, that was. I guess that was a case of look. I'm not going to be tentative if I'm injured and I'm wincing and I've got tears in my eyes. As let's face it, fellas, we know how that feels. I think you just figured, look, I'm just going to swing for the fences here, and you know, basically almost scare myself into getting back into the swing of things. I've got to say, the West Indian bowling though was appalling in this one. Jason Holder aside, the veteran was economical. He didn't look all that threatening, but he was at least economical. He at least held up an end. But overall, it was terrible. Alzari Joseph, I mentioned he got carded for a huge 6 early in the innings. He was brilliant in the last game. 4 overs and genuinely frightening. He was that good. He got shelled in this one. I think he ended up none for 39.
Yeah.
Odean Smith only bowled 2 overs and got taken for 23. Like, I said it early on that this is a new generation for West Indian cricket, and they're hoping that this generation can build into something. But this is a side that's won 2 of these T20 World Cups, and frankly, if this generation will get better, but my God, they'd want to. This was just a horrible tournament for the Windies.
Yes, it was.
Their best players were their veterans, and that's not a good sign.
No, especially for a team that we've said is trying to kind of change that generation. You want to see this young talent get going. But we'll move on to the other match in Group B this morning US, this evening, afternoon in Australia. Scotland and Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe ended up winning by 5 wickets, 133 for 5 to 132 for 6. And to me, I thought Scotland was kind of got going. Strong start from George Munsey once again, 54 runs from 51 balls. But after that, there was really nothing going for that offense.
Yeah, no, Munsey was good again, and he is a good player. But overall, it was actually a pretty poor start for the Scots. They won the toss in this one and batted, which is pretty rare in T20 cricket. They lost Michael Jones and Matt Cross early. They lost Matt. Like, I don't know whether anyone, if you want to go back and watch it, Matt Cross fell to a spectacular, like a brilliant diving catch from Wesley Mataveri. But Munsey, he is explosive. He tends to be a power hitter. He was forced to play more of a sheet anchor role in this one, more accumulating runs. And that, I would assume that came about because of the loss of the 2 early wickets. But the fact that he picked up runs, but he was quite slow in doing it. The run rate was the collateral for that. He did have a couple of nice partnerships with Richie Berrington, the skipper, and a late one with Callum McLeod, who had 25 runs. But this was a really good batting surface at Bellerive, and I think the Scots were realistically, they were just too slow to accumulate their runs.
Yeah.
But having said that, I have to give credit to the Zimbabwean bowlers. Those 3 young quicks did it again. Tendai Chitara was fantastic, 14 from 4 overs. And Sikandar Raza, the all-rounder, he was really good in the middle overs. 1 for 20, very economical. And he's just so difficult to get away. He bowls with so much variety. You just can't pick. You don't know what to expect from one ball to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other guy, Richard Ngrava, he got 2 wickets for 28 runs in 4 overs. And those 3 kind of shut down the potential of the Scottish attack, which was not necessarily surprising, but it was kind of interesting to see after Scotland, we thought might be getting their bats have been looking good so far against the West Indies and against Ireland, but just wasn't to be.
No, just wasn't. But you look, the Zimbabweans, though, I mean, they would have felt pretty good having held Scotland to 132. They would have thought, yeah, we can chase this pretty well. But terrible start for them. Chakabva and Mataveri both went inside the first 10 deliveries.
Yeah, it was just a absolutely brutal start for Zimbabwe that could have set the tempo for them to kind of just implode on themselves. But Craig Irvine really stepped up. 58 from 54, six boundaries, no sixes, but he was still kind of kept that Zimbabwe in it and had a good pairing with Sikandar Raza further down the match.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Irvine's innings. Like, he's been around forever now. He's 37. But he pulled on all of that experience. He saw two people go down early and he steadied the ship. Yeah, he kept the scoreboard ticking over, but unlike what Muncie did, he didn't get too bogged down. He didn't get too defensive. So when Raza eventually came to the crease with the score at 3 for 42, and Zimbabwe did look in a fair bit of trouble then, they still had enough leeway that Raza's big hitting could build an innings for them. And, we talk about Raza big hitting. He really did hit it big. A couple of sixes, 3 fours, 40 off 23. It was a short, sharp innings, but typically explosive from the all-rounder. I thought Irvine was really good. He read the situation very well and reacted perfectly.
Absolutely.
But, having said that, though, the Scots were still in with a chance late in this one. Raza went in the 15th over, I think, and Irvine went in the 17th. So, once those two go out, you've got new batsmen at the crease. Are they going to be able to pick up the pace quick enough? So, credit to Ryan Burl and Milton Shumba. They steered the Zimbabweans home. Ultimately, it was Irvine's, what's the best way to put it? I don't even think of the word. It's very late over here. But he played a steadying role. That's probably the best word. He played a steadying role, and Raza's acceleration in the middle of the innings. Now, at one point, Zimbabwe had 10-plus runs in 5 out of 6 overs, a block of 5 out of 6 overs. And that was purely down to Raza. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
But Shumba and Burl did a good job steering the Zimbabweans home as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, when Irvine went out, they were 119 for 5, and it looked like it could get out of hand relatively quickly, but Shumba and Burl came in and got the job done. I do want to point out that 2 guys on the bowling side for Scotland that were kind of impressive to me were Josh Davey, 2 for 16 in 3 overs, and Mark Watt, 1 for 19 in 4 overs with 9.
Yeah, Watt was very economical.
So, but I mean, the first round group stage is done, and we have from this group, surprisingly enough, Zimbabwe topping it, Ireland second, Scotland third, and the West Indies finishing 4th.
Yeah, that's a devastating result for the Windies.
It really is. So now let's just have a quick look at Group 1 and Group 2 now that they're set. In Group 1, we have Afghanistan, Australia, England, New Zealand, along with Sri Lanka and Ireland. And Group 2 is Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, South Africa, and now Netherlands and Zimbabwe. So what are your just initial thoughts on these 2 groups?
Well, as we were saying in the preview, and I think we mentioned it in one of the recap pods as well, that Group 1, that's a nightmare of a group. That really is a nightmare of a group. Afghanistan, as much as they're the weakest team of the 4 that were originally in the group, they've got some match winners in that group. Australia, England, they're 2 of the favourites for me, and New Zealand are a genuine dark horse to win this. You look at the other side, India would have been, as I mentioned in the previews, India would have been my favourite to win it if they'd brought their entire bowling attack. But, Ravi Jadeja and Jasprit Bumrah, huge outs for them.
Oh, yeah.
So ultimately, I think Zimbabwe and the Netherlands have probably got the easier group. So I almost feel a bit sorry for Sri Lanka and Ireland walking into what's going to be an absolute hellscape of Group 1. There is no game in that group that you can look at and go, we've got a genuine shot here. everyone's got a puncher's chance in T20 cricket. That's the beauty of the game. It's almost like short track speed skating. You can always get a surprise result, but yeah, it's gonna take a lot of chips falling their way for Sri Lanka and Ireland to get wins in this group, except for against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ireland, they're going to want to try and do something against the English as the British Isles rivalry, but as we've mentioned many times before, them and Scotland are just not at the level to compete with England at all yet. And it's kind of the same with the Netherlands. They're not going to be, well, Netherlands has a better chance in Group B, but I still don't think they'll do much. But let's just look at the next 4 matches that are coming up. So tomorrow morning in the US, tomorrow afternoon in Australia, we got a great grudge match to start the Super 12, Australia and New Zealand.
Yep, the local rivalry.
That's going to be a fun one to watch.
Like Australia and New Zealand are united in our hatred of England, but at the same time, when we play each other, it can get pretty chippy as well. I got to admit, I've got a real soft spot for this generation of New Zealand cricket. I think they're a really, really good side. Having said that, my green and gold heart, tells me that the locals will win it. Australia will win this one. But I tell you, I think it's gonna be an absolutely ripping match. I'm coaching basketball all day tomorrow, and I'm coming home. It's going on the telly. I'm going to sit there with a couple of ciders and just delve right into this match. I'm gonna love watching this one.
Absolutely. And there's one thing I've been seeing and reading about today that kind of has me questioning around the match. So there's 90% chance of rain. There's meant to be a huge storm that hits Sydney when this match is going on. So it'll be interesting.
Well,
how that.
Yeah, like I can tell you here that I'm down in I'm about an hour and a half outside of Melbourne, but down in Victoria, we've had some devastating floods in the last few weeks. Yeah, a friend of mine got flooded out.
Oh, geez.
And we've had rain all day today. We're expecting rain tomorrow and Sunday as well. Sydney will be getting more rain this time around than what they did a week and a half ago. It was centred around Melbourne and Victoria last time, but there is a chance, and you sort of burst my bubble a bit there, Jerry. I'd kind of put the weather out of my mind, so I'm really hoping that we do get a game here. But yeah, there is a pretty significant rain ban coming over in the next few days.
And just out of curiosity, for maybe those who don't know, what would happen if the rain causes a delay? Would they postpone it, or would they just mark it as a draw?
They'd have to mark it as a no results. I don't know if there's a provision to reschedule the game. I kind of hope there is, to be honest. It's probably something I'll need to look up. But yeah, typically when a match is washed out, then it's just put down as a no result, effectively a draw.
Absolutely. And let's just quickly go through these next 2 matches because we have another huge grudge match to wrap things up for these next 4. But England plays Afghanistan. I feel like England should win that relatively easy. Afghanistan's not a bad side, but nothing super special.
I'm scared stiff of this English side. Like, an Australian's worst nightmare is having England win a World Cup on Australian soil, and I am petrified that this could happen. This English side is a powerhouse. So, as good as Afghanistan are, and they do have some genuine world-class cricketers in their side, it really should be an English one.
All right. And then the other one, Ireland, Sri Lanka, 2 teams that have just gotten through. This is the one we were talking about, probably their best chance to win a game in this Super 12 round. I think I don't know which way I'm leaning. It's kind of a coin toss for me. They've both shown signs of being good, signs of being terrible at times. But what do you think of that match?
Sri Lanka will enter as favourites, but I'm coming around to this Irish batting lineup. I'm a big fan of their middle order, and given the way their top order played in the last match, as we've recapped in this pod, if that top order can maintain a little bit of momentum, then suddenly there's 6 guys who can go for 30 or 40 in this side, and you only need, say, 3, maybe 4 of them to go for 30 or 40, and you're going to set a really big total. So I'm going to pick the Irish in an upset for this one.
Oh, I like that pick. Like I said, I think it's a coin toss. I could see both sides winning. But the last match of these next 2 days, India-Pakistan, probably one of, if not the most heated rivalry in cricket.
Yeah.
So that'll
Yeah.
be, and it's two teams that, as you mentioned, Pakistan extremely inconsistent in T20 recently, and India's missing two of their top bowlers. So, just what do you think of this one?
Look, and you're right. This is the biggest rivalry in cricket. Everyone's got a little bit of a rivalry with the English because they invented the game. Everyone's got a little bit of a rivalry with Australia because they spent 20 years from pretty much the late 80s through to uh, realistically the 2010-ish dominating the game.
Hmm.
But this one isn't just a cricket rivalry. This is a political
Oh,
rivalry, a
absolutely.
religious rivalry. The countries border each other. They've been to war before. This one means a lot. This is the biggest sport in both countries, and it's not even close to the sports that come second, third, fourth, whatever. So this one means a lot to both Indians and Pakistanis. Um,
Oh, I was
You know,
gonna.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say the Pakistanis will win in an upset,
Oh,
purely because I think it's almost stereotypical of Pakistani cricket to take a massive scalp in the group stages and then get to the big match and absolutely shoot themselves in the foot. So I'm going to tip Australia over New Zealand, England over Afghanistan, Ireland to upset the Sri Lankans, and Pakistan in the biggest of the upsets to take down India.
I'm going with at least the first two. I think it's Australia and England getting it done. I think Sri Lanka, Ireland coin toss. I'll probably go with the Irish in this one, and then I do think India gets it done.
So
But
we've been in lockstep for most of these, Jerry.
we
So
have
you
so
were close to picking Sri Lanka then as well. So
well,
this is the first time we've had a real divergence, I think.
yeah, it's been, I don't know, it's nice to actually have a little bit of a difference in opinion at
Mm.
times. So that's kind of all from us for this episode of Vendetta Sports Media's T20 Cricket World Cup coverage. Find it on Twitter, find it on our YouTube page, our website. You can reach out to Jarrod on Twitter at hey_it's_JP. Hit me up at JerryF007, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.